Derek Taylor was born in 1966 in Los Angeles, California, where he lived until he left home for college. He grew up going to public schools within walking distance of his house until his school closed when he was in 7th grade as a result of the passing of Proposition 13 in California, which was an amendment to the state constitution regarding the limiting of property tax. One casualty of this was a loss of funding for the public school system, which meant closing Derek's school, Fairgrove Elementary. As a result of this, he and his classmates were moved to schools 3 miles away, discouraging students from literacy as they had to either find rides or bus to school. Despite the government limiting education in the area, Derek was impacted by many of his teachers throughout school, but it was his 1st and 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Kiefer, that left one of the largest educational impacts on his life. One day, Mrs. Kiefer took Derek and a handful of other students across town with her for a field trip. On the trip, they explored a predominantly Hispanic area surrounding Dodger Stadium and gained knowledge by experiencing a culture that they had not been highly exposed to yet. In class with Mrs. Kiefer, Derek was constantly encouraged to think broader and expand his mind in regards to the way his education could be used. While Mrs. Kiefer and many other teachers had positive impacts on Derek's education, his parents also played a heavy role in his literacy. At home, Derek's mother would constantly tell her children stories. She would recount anything from a movie she had seen recently to a story about her mother. She would narrate these stories with intensive detail, allowing Derek to immerse himself within the story, visualizing everything as it happened. Derek's parents bought an Encyclopedia Britannica set for their children as they encouraged them in their education. Along with the encyclopedias came a set of 6 classic books, one of which was Robin Hood, which Derek's parents mandated that he read. Much like Mrs. Kiefer, Derek's parents not only encouraged his literacy in print and reading, but they also helped him grow by exposing him to larger educational experiences. For example, they often visited zoos as well as many other places, such as the La Brea tar pits. Through experiences such as these, Derek's parents were able to further his literacy in non-traditional ways. While Derek's father's formal education ended before he was a teenager, he knew that effort towards a better education for Derek could really pay off later in life. This is evident as he often told Derek, "Don't get C's. C's are average. Anyone can be average." Because of this, Derek put high levels of effort into his education by reading everything assigned, even when most other students would not. His father also put him in a private high school in order to assure that Derek would have the highest quality education possible. Along with Mrs. Kiefer and Derek's parents, football also played a big role in forwarding Derek's literacy, as it provided him with a scholarship to the University of California, Berkeley. While at UC Berkeley, Derek was exposed to many different ideologies and ways of life, as the university was a hub for protests and movements with subject matter ranging anywhere from human rights to environmental issues. Having these protests and movements on campus encouraged classrooms to be filled with discussions regarding real-life issues and ideas that many students at other universities were not exposed to. After Derek graduated from Berkeley with his MBA, he was hired by Procter & Gamble and has continued to work for the company for the last 24 years. Now, as a category manager for the Duracell business, he calls on Walmart and deals with quite a bit of analysis. Through his 24 years with the company, Derek gained a new literacy of sales and business that might not have been available to him outside of his profession. By taking a deep look at a few of the major influences on Derek Taylor's literacy, we can clearly see that there is a definite relation between literacy and place. Take, for example, Fairgrove Elementary closing down when Derek was in 7th grade. Political systems left the school without funding, forcing it to shut its doors. This greatly affected students in the area, and while some students such as Derek continued on in their push for education, other students were deterred from literacy because of the newfound distance between the students and their school. A second example of the connection between literacy and place can be seen in Derek's experience with protests and movements while on campus at UC Berkeley. If he were not on that specific campus, he might not have been able to experience so many different worldviews and ideologies. Along with this, Derek was able to interact with people from widely different backgrounds while attending university. While in college, he noticed that students from different areas of the state and country had a leg up on other students because of the education that they had received in their hometown before coming to university. Some students came from public schools while others came from private and boarding schools. One example of a disparity in education that Derek found in school was the ability to type. Some students were taught how to type in their high schools before they came to college, while others, such as Derek, were forced to learn on the fly. While recognizing the connection between one's literacy and their surrounding area is important, it is crucial for educators to understand the implications of this. By understanding how this relationship affects students, educators can modify their curriculum to better reach students. For example, When looking at the effects that real-life experiences had on Derek Taylor's education and literacy, educators should feel challenged to integrate similar real-life situations into their lesson plan. One opportunity to do this is through the use of educational field trips. Mrs. Kiefer was able to expose Derek and his fellow students to literacies that they would be unable to understand if they had only read textbooks. And this is something that educators should not take lightly. It is also important for educators to understand that engaging students' interests can go a long way in furthering each student's literacy. For example, Derek was quite interested in the business economics class he had in high school. This interest not only led him to succeeding in the class, but it also led him in the direction of his future career in business. By paying attention to students' interests, educators can impact a student's life forever.